Hey, everybody, welcome to episode number 41 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. You know, student loan debt has soared to almost $1.6 trillion with 45 million borrowers now. It's become the second largest debt behind mortgages, and for many, it's causing a ton of financial stress. But listen, if you're a parent of a child getting ready for school, getting ready to go to college, what if you could help your kids skip all that debt and financial stress and go to college with, say, little debt, or even, crazy enough, no debt at all? Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's impossible, but I've got a special guest here today that's going to share some tips on just how to do that. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we're helping normal, everyday people learn how to save money and kick debt so they can live a happier and stress-free life. Now here's your host, Debt Free Dad, Brad Nelson.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? Thanks for taking some time out of your day to hang out with me and to give you tips to help you reach a debt-free life. You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram. I would love to connect with you. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad, and welcome to today's show. So as I mentioned in the intro, when we open the show, student loan debt is causing a ton of stress. And as I've worked with thousands of people now, I see these loans having a huge impact on people's finances. And in a lot of cases, it's adding a lot more pressure on day-to-day life. People are delaying buying homes. They're delaying starting a family. They're delaying reaching other financial goals. And what if it didn't have to be that way, though? What if you had kids and you could help them avoid a lot of that stress? And I know that there's a lot of people out there that probably doubt that, you know, you can actually go to college with no debt, or, you know, maybe even just a little bit of debt. But what if you could do that? And that's why I'm excited to welcome Jocelyn, Penita, Pearson to the show today. Jocelyn founded the scholarship system to share her own experience of graduating from college with zero student loans. Now, when college looked unaffordable for Jocelyn, she sprang into action and secured over $126,000 in college scholarships, even receiving an overage check for expenses. Now, it wasn't an easy process, however. It took her years to figure out exactly what to do to be selected for these scholarships. Now, check this out. This is the amazing part. Now she helps families learn how they can do the same by teaching them her 6-step system. Families have secured over multiple 7 figures in scholarships and growing. Jocelyn is from Charleston, South Carolina, and is married to her husband, Donnie. And very excited to welcome you on the show, Jocelyn. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the myths. And I kind of mentioned one of the big ones, just the whole myth and, can we even go to school nowadays without having to take on a bunch of loans and a bunch of debt? And I've worked with lots of people who are kind of stuck under the shadows of those myths. But what are some of the common things that are kind of keeping people stuck and feeling like that's the only way you can go to school?
Yeah. Well, we have myths regarding scholarships, but I think you brought up a huge one, and it's the idea that, if we want to go to school, we just have to accept the debt and that's it, right? That's the new ticket to the American dream. And that's not the case. And the good news is that we've seen families every single year pull it off. So this is not just my own experience now. We've been doing this full time, helping families for over half a decade, not including the half a decade that I was doing it for myself. And the thing that we say it requires is they have to be a little rebellious. So one thing that we have is #RebelFamily among our members. And what I mean by that is it does require us to think outside the box. It might require us to get a little savvy, maybe a little scruffy. But in the end, there are families that are drastically reducing what they have to borrow in the first place. And even some of them getting to where they have overage checks. In fact, actually, some of the students have even beat me where I got my free ride throughout college. They were able to pull it off by the end of high school. So that said, it is possible. Does it require work? Of course. Does it require sacrifice in some ways, depending on what you want? Sometimes. And does it require teamwork among the family? Yes, we all have to be in this together. But the thing is, if they can pull it off, we're not talking about 4 years of debt-free living and education and being able to focus on our future. we're talking about decades back of their life that I know that your audience can relate to this, and you can. We're avoiding the debt in the first place. So rather than them starting their life in the hole, they can really start at it ahead of their peers, in fact. And because of that, it'll just compound. So I love that you brought that up, because I do think people think it's not possible anymore, but the good news is that it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the other co-hosts that we have is my brother Ryan on the show, and he's got a younger son in his 20s going to college right now, and they've really worked this plan, not necessarily all with scholarships, but just really taking advantage of the different opportunities that were available to him, and he's going to graduate with no college debt. And at first he was kind of complaining about, he wanted to go to the big fancy school and have the college, experience. And Ryan's talked a lot about on this show. Now he's starting to see that, wow, this is really going to pay off for me and for my future by not having to deal with a lot of that student loan debt after he graduates, which is awesome. We talked about myths, but what are some myths around maybe some scholarships and things that we can talk about?
Yeah. So when it comes to getting the debt-free degree, in my opinion, scholarships is one of the biggest pieces of it. So this can be scholarships from the university. This could be scholarships from outside sources. There's many different places that we can find scholarships, and we can get into that. But one of the most popular beliefs that I hear, and it's so funny, if it's families that are before senior year, they say, oh, it's too early for us. And any family that is senior year and later, oh, it's too late for us. And I always laugh. I'm like, wait a minute, where did the year between junior and senior year happen when it was the right time?
Yeah.
And you'll talk to senior families and college student families, and they'll say, gosh, we wish that we did this earlier. But then, it's always one of those things where hindsight's 2020. So that said, there are scholarships out there for students as young as 4 years old. I know it sounds crazy. Did
you say 4 years? 4? Four. Wow.
Yes. And of course they're not very common, but just to make a point that I think they have to draw a picture, they submit it, and they get like a bond that matures or something.
Sure.
But my point is, there are scholarships out there for students that are much younger than a senior in high school or a college student. And so if we can, I would love for students to start a lot earlier than what they're thinking. And I know that sounds like more work, but actually it can alleviate a lot of the stress rather than waiting until last minute. So it is possible. We have many lists for students 13, 14, 15 years old.
Wow.
But also on the flip side, a lot of families give up once they get to college. They say, okay, well, we had to borrow this amount for freshman year, so that is what it is. Let's multiply it by 4 plus the inflation amount, and that's what we're going to have to borrow. And that is also not the case. In fact, when I got to my free ride, when I worked my way to 6 figures in scholarships, my senior year, I had enough to cover freshman year. My freshman year, I had to get more to cover sophomore, and so on and so forth. So what mine looked like was a little staircase. I slowly accumulated my way to 6 figures and a debt-free degree. And so my point here is that there are scholarships for students that are well into college years. In fact, my final check that I cashed was on my way home from college graduation.
Wow.
So it's never too late either. So even if families have a senior that's coming in and a student that's already in college, have them do this together, because it's never too early. It's never too late. Another common one is, well, my student is an average student. They don't have a perfect GPA or high test scores. And the first thing I want to say is my SAT was below average. I didn't even take the ACT. My GPA was good, but ultimately, we have found hundreds of universities that give out thousands of dollars for a 2.8 or higher. Now, I'm not saying that's a terrible GPA, but it's definitely not high and competitive. And I think a lot of families are surprised to hear that wait a minute, so my student with a 3.4 can get money? Absolutely. And not just from universities, but from private scholarships as well. In fact, through the scholarship system, we've given out money for 5 years now as a way to give back. We've given out scholarships, and we ask for GPA in case we need it for, say, a tiebreaker. In 5 years and in dozens of awards, we have never once even looked at it. So there's also private scholarships that don't even ask for test scores.
Okay.
So those are 2 big ones. I have 2 more. Do you have any questions about those 2 before?
No, I think the GPA one surprises me, because I'm 41 years old, and I started the whole college thing 20 years ago. I ended up going to a tech school and was able to pay cash for it, which was great. But that was one of the conversations that was always like, especially in senior years, we figured that I wouldn't qualify for any scholarships because I didn't have over a 3.0 grade average. I was not the great student in school. So we automatically just kind of assumed that I would have been disqualified. And that's really great information, especially for, parents out there that maybe have kids that aren't necessarily pulling those really high grades. That's great.
Yeah. And, this is where I say, does it take, and sacrifice is a tough word. Compromise might be better. Do we need to maybe cast our net wider and look at schools that were not on our list? That can help. And this is one of the things we teach our families is to follow the money first, then find personal fit and academic fit, right? So find the financial fits first. Maybe we've had students that actually figured out, wait a minute, I can get money to go to Duke. I figured they were well off my radar, right? And so this doesn't even mean that we're going to a second-rate university. It just might mean that there's a university just like your dream school, except that they are looking for your major, your characteristics, whatever. And so they have money and you didn't even know about it. So first, let's build a list. You can still have your list that's based on personal desires, but also build one based off financial fit and see if it uncovers some hidden gems. Now, the next one is that a lot of students believe that they have to get a big scholarship and that's a good scholarship and that's how we get to a free ride. But the way I worked my way to a free ride was a lot of smaller dollar scholarships that added up. And so my university only gave me, I think it was $2,000 a year or maybe $2,000 a semester. Either way, it was a fraction of the cost. It was very disappointing. And so I knew I had to hit the ground running with these outside scholarships and really bring in money. And so I applied, I won. My first one was $500. Then there was like $1,200, $1,800, $2,000, $1,000. And the biggest one I got was $4,000. So a lot of students, they think of like the Dr. Pepper and the Coca-Cola ones where there's $100,000 award. But the thing is, you're competing against tens of thousands of students, if not hundreds of thousands at this point. And yet there's a $500 scholarship that has 3 applicants and you can. So for my students, they know this. And actually it's crazy. One student won $15 the other day, which I will say is the smallest amount I've ever seen, but that was them getting 3rd place. And they know that they have an almost winning essay. So they got paid to figure that out. But it just goes to show they understand what Jocelyn says. The good scholarships are not the big ones. They're the smaller ones because they're less competitive. You have a higher chance of winning them. And they're still money. They can still add up to a free ride. One more story with this. We just had a family win a $100 scholarship and a $500 scholarship. That's their first win. And they came in the same week. And it took less than 3 hours of work. So you're looking at $200 hourly rate.
Yeah.
Please tell me where a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old can make that kind of rate, or even a 40-year-old for that matter. So that's the 3rd myth, and that's a big one. Yeah,
that's awesome. And while you're talking about kind of that time and hourly rate that they can earn, about roughly how much time are your students spending on doing this? I'm guessing it's, age appropriate, but how much time do you think on average they're spending as they're getting ready for college to start writing these essays and doing the scholarship work?
When we estimate it, we always say you're looking at 40 hours a school year. So a full-time week of work, but spread out throughout the school year. Realistically, do students spread the work out? They tend to batch things and do them over holidays and stuff.
Sure.
But we have an online course, for example, and that takes them about 5 to 7 hours to go through.
Sure.
But the thing is, they're implementing it as they go. And when you have these tips and suggestions, the idea is it should take you a lot less time when you know you're doing things right from the beginning. So my process, my first year doing this, I wasted the entire year applying to what I didn't know then, but now I know were scams. So I spent tons of hours on all these applications and they weren't legitimate at all. And so in that year, I thought it was just a total sham. I was like, these aren't even real. So if I looked at that hourly rate, that would be horrible, right? In the end, I only won $500. But from there, when I won that $500 scholarship, I realized, wait a minute, okay, these are those. I started figuring out the differences and tweaking my strategy. That said, I know that's a great answer. It really does depend, but our rule of thumb is 40 hours for an entire school year. So 1 to 2 hours a week if you want to spread it out.
Well, I think it's great that you point that out because I think a lot of kids and probably a lot of parents feel like if you're going to have to get these smaller scholarships, like how much time I'm actually going to have to spend doing all of this. And I mean, 40 hours for a school year is nothing. Even if it was 80 hours for a school year, that's nothing compared to a lot of the stress that you're going to face if you don't take the time to do some of this stuff. So I think it's great that you put a time to it, because I think there's probably some people out there that are a little concerned about how long it would take to actually get awarded a lot of these smaller things. So
yeah. And I mean, how many, I cannot remember the statistic, but a huge portion of college graduates have to work 2 jobs to afford their bills and living.
Yes.
So figure all of those hours, right? In 1 week, you're going to be working well into what you could have done for scholarships. So, that's for decades. The last one is around this fallacy of it has to take tons of time. So that's our 4th myth, actually, which I think we've tackled pretty well. But just to rehash, one of the biggest things here is if we can create solid competitive materials that we're submitting. And the thing is, we can't submit the same thing over and over when we're not winning, right? Then you're just going to get the same result, which is a no. But once we start getting a couple wins in, we can start reusing those essays, building on them, fine tuning them. I mean, it got to the point where I had one core personal statement, and I pretty much use that for most of my applications throughout college. I just updated it every year. So that's just one example where we really can save time when it comes to this process. So the way that our earnings, the scholarships often look is it's kind of like a hockey stick, right? It's slow to start and then it skyrockets. But our effort is inverted. So is inverted. So at first it's a high amount of effort, and then it greatly just swoops down and decreases as we go.
Interesting. And I'm assuming in your program, you offer essay training and things that should be included and all of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, because that's the thing, a lot of students, and this should probably be a big myth as well, actually, a lot of students assume you have to be an amazing writer to win these. And of course you do have to write quality essays, but I actually hated writing. And so, if we just know how to pick the right stories, find our values, and show how it relates to whatever they're asking about, that's just right there. That's a pretty good framework, actually. That's kind of our main 3-point summary that we teach our students is, pick an experience and a story, and then take a value or a lesson out of it and show how it'll impact you in the future. If you keep that framework in mind and reassess all of the prompts. And this is for admissions as well. Admissions, Common App, essay prompts. I mean, they're all the same, even when they're asking you questions in job interviews or internship interviews, it's all the same thing. But when we get that right story figured out and stuff, we can reuse it over and over.
Awesome. Great tips. What type of debt-free money is out there for individuals and students?
Yeah. So first line of defense, we always say we want to focus on merit money. The first and easiest way to decrease what we're going to have to borrow is by reducing our bill in the first place. So can we find a university that is going to give us money? There's 2 different types of money that universities give out. One is automatic merit aid, and that is based on your statistics. So if you hit certain numbers, or if you hit a certain characteristic, maybe it's being a certain minority, or maybe it's being first generation, but these are often listed on their website. And if you qualify for them, you just get them, right? You can see in junior year, you can look at your ideal colleges and look up, hey, what kind of scholarships do they give out, and what are the criteria? And you can shoot for them. Another one that colleges give out is competitive merit aid. And that's where you might have interviews or phone calls or essays that you have to compete with. So that's both of those fall into college merit money. Then we have Fafsa and financial need-based aid. And this is a common one. A lot of families think that they have to be low income in order to get any money. These days, most people cannot afford college. So the gap is there for many families, but you can only be considered for the money if you submit Fafsa. So this is where a lot of people think most of the money comes from. It is certainly every family should try. It doesn't have to be your main source. So if you don't get anything from it, that's okay. At the very least, if you do end up having to take loans, the FAFSA loans through the government are 9 times out of 10 better terms anyway and more flexible, as we're seeing right now, depending on when we're listening to this, if the government has still frozen payments or frozen payments and interest. Now, the next line of defense, after we've got as much money, we've received as much money as we can from the university, we submit FAFSA to get as much government money as we can, or state-based grants. And most of that grants don't have to be paid back, loans do. And then we can start applying for outside scholarships as well. And I say then, but we can be applying for scholarships, outside scholarships, again, as young as 4 years old, technically. But this is money from any kind of outside sources. It could be from banks, credit unions, Elks Club, Rotary Club, PTA, PTSA. It could be from a local booster club, anything. Banks, it could be from grocery stores, construction companies. We've seen them all over. People like myself, the scholarship system that just want to give back. So this kind of money oftentimes don't stipulate what university you have to go to. They just say it has to be an accredited university. So it's nice and versatile. You know, you can use it depending on wherever you go for the most part, as long as they're all valid schools. And then the last set of money is called cash awards. These are pretty much the same as scholarships, except scholarships are given out for the next school year. So say it's fall and I win a scholarship, it's typically given out for the following fall. So it's always for next school year for the most part, or at least next semester. Cash awards, however, are a cash check that is immediately sent to your student. So it is an award. If you win an award, you get the money right then and there. It's the same thing with cash awards. These, of course, are our students' favorites, but they're more common for sophomore, junior, seniors in college. So a lot of times they want to see that you're in college and doing it, but those exist as well.
Okay. So, I mean, you're going through all these and you mentioned kind of all of the different areas where you could possibly get scholarships. Cause I'm thinking in my head, like, where would you even, because I've got a son, he's going to be 10, going to be 11 this year. I'm sorry, he is 10, going to be 11 this year. And, you know, I know we're going to start having some of these conversations as he gets older. And one of the first things I'm going to be thinking is, if he can get scholarships, where do we even look for some of this stuff? Is there resources out there? Because I've also seen statistics that a lot of scholarships go even unawarded, like they just sit there because nobody really applies for them. So how do people get the information to find out what's actually available out there?
And I will tell you that that's true about scholarships that are not, fortunately, we have been around long enough that they email us, they find our website, the scholarship system, and they contact us and they're like, do you have students that will apply? We have no applicants.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. I know, it's crazy. We have one scholarship that the last 3 years, one of our students has won, and it's because they sent it to us. And as a perk, we only share it we don't share it publicly. We only share it with our members.
Yeah.
And every year, one of our students wins, and it's just incredible. It blows my mind. And also another scholarship that I won, they were giving out 2 awards. Only 4 of us applied. So they reached out to the donors and asked if they would match their money. And so they doubled the amount and they gave all of us the award. So it was a 100% success rate. We literally just had to submit the application.
Wow, so, that is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the first couple of years that we had our scholarship, there was one year where we only had 7 applicants and we were giving out, I think, 3 awards. So it is true. It is really true. That said, to answer your question, where can we find these? So first, most people go to the search engines. That for us, honestly, is our last line of defense. There's so much, you really have to sift through a lot of junk. Also, if we're all going to fastweb.com, we are all finding the same scholarships and we are all competing against each other. So I'm going to give a suggestion. This is our Google keyword method. And this is it's gold. It's simple, but not easy. A lot of families overlook this because it's so simple. But it's very strategic and intentional. So a lot of what we do is we use Google, which a lot of people would think, of course we use Google, Jocelyn, right? We go to Google and search scholarships. But a lot of students, what happens is they just search scholarships or scholarships for seniors. And what they get is a ton of junk. They go to FastWeb, they're overwhelmed. They find tons of stuff that they're not eligible for. And that overwhelm, in my opinion, is the number one reason students don't get scholarships. It's not that they're not legitimate. It's not that their essays are bad. It's that they quit because they're just swamped with a ton of junk. So instead, what we teach is to use Google in a very specific way, very, very detailed. What we want to do is try and get as specific as we can. Here's one example, and this is a real example. One of our students, she loves horses. So we actually scholarships for horse lovers. And here's where the trick is when the results come up, you're going to get scholarships.com, fastweb.com, all the search engines at the top. What we want to do is keep scrolling until we see a domain, a URL of an association or a company related to the topic we just searched. So for her, she found like equestrianrider.com/scholarships. Well, that domain looks quite legitimate, right? It's from an organization that's related to equestrian stuff. I'm saying I love horses. Let's check it out. So then we open that up, boom, 6 scholarships that she was eligible for. So we're narrowing the results and we're going directly to the sources of the scholarships rather than these search engines. There's a few reasons why this works so well. First, we're finding scholarships that a lot of times aren't in the search engines. So again, they're less competitive. I don't know if you knew this, but the search engines actually charge for you to put your scholarships on there. Right. Me as a small company, I'm not going to put the money towards them putting it on their portal. I'm going to put the money towards the awards, right? So mine's not on there. There's tons that are not on there. Second, we are increasing the chances that it's legitimate because we're going directly to the company's site rather than it just being some miscellaneous application somewhere that's not really related to them. And also when you go there, a lot of times you'll see the winners, the stories. You can see that, okay, this is legitimate. And third, by getting specific, we are also narrowing it down to ones that we're actually eligible for. So I don't have to sift through, like if it's Equestrian's website and I'm looking for horse-based scholarships, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to find something that makes sense, right? Yeah. So, and you can do this with major. We can do this, for example, we can get specific by, this is another one. Say I want to pursue engineering. Don't just look up engineering scholarships, look up engineering association scholarships. So what we're doing now is instead of finding big lists from search engines, we're going to association websites that are specific for engineers and they're giving out awards. So any major or career path plus the word association plus the word scholarship. And we can do this to look up local scholarships as well.
Wow, that's awesome. And of course, these are all tips that you share in your program, right?
Oh yeah, in much more detail, of course. But I think that this is some pretty solid stuff that people can take action on right away.
Absolutely. But I'm just talking about it just from a learning curve standpoint. I mean, I'm just fascinated by it. I was like, I've never even thought about any of this stuff. And you just think about the huge catch up you can have on just a short period of time, just investing in a little bit of education, man. You can learn a ton that can save you a ton of money. So that's awesome. You know, you mentioned getting a little bit more specific on your searches in Google. And I kind of pose this question to you. Maybe you can speak to it a little bit. But what I find working with people who have a lot of student loan debt is the issue with some never even finished school. Or 2, they finished school with a degree that they weren't really terribly interested in. So do you work with parents and kids on how to align talents and strengths with interests and really pursuing what it is that they want to do and something that's also marketable after they leave school? So they're not leaving school with a degree that's essentially worthless because there's really not a job that they can really get or they haven't done enough research to find that they can actually get a career doing what they went to school for. What do you work with any, or you give any tips for that type of thing?
Yeah, I'll give a couple suggestions. So one of the things so we actually have 2 programs. We have one that's solely focused on scholarships. That's the scholarship system. We have another that's all about just getting a debt-free degree, all of the side strategies in addition to scholarships. And one is, you hit the nail on the head, graduating on time and not having to switch our major and switching our schools. Just by making the right decisions from the beginning, we can save tens of thousands of dollars and years of our life, right? And so that is absolutely a huge piece of it. So we do have a lesson in that, but that's in our program that's complementary to the scholarship side of things because it is outside of scholarships. But that said, just quickly, a couple suggestions that we have. You know, one of the biggest things that we talk about with our families is an ROI on college. You know, looking at, okay, how much are we going to borrow if this is the school we choose, and how much are we going to use? So find the total cost and then look at what's the salary in this career when we graduate? I mean, how many years is it going to take me to get my money back? And for some students, you're going to find going to Harvard to become an English teacher and make $27,000 a year in the South, it's not going to add up unless you get a lot of money, right? And so doing that calculation is very important for students. So I recommend first off calculating the ROI of a degree. And that can be very eye-opening. We've had some students completely change the school that they're choosing by doing that. So parents that are having a hard time motivating your students, this can be a little trick up your sleeve. The other thing I would recommend is there is a great website. It's called, let me see here. It's called mynextmove.org, not .com, mynextmove.org. And that's a great website that you can use and see what, fill in some questions and see what comes up. Another one that's great is just Myers-Briggs, right? You can go to 16personalities.com and take the test and see what they come up with. And I'm not saying we should pigeonhole ourselves based on these tests, because there's always exceptions and we also change as we age. But it is a great start, and just see if anything piques their interest. And then from there, we always recommend, can we shadow? Can we shadow? Can we do an internship? Can I do some other kind of in-person research around this to really validate that it's a fit? And lastly, the thing is, they're still kids.
Right.
They're going to change. Ideally, if we can, let's not pigeonhole ourselves too early to where we're going to have to start over. So, those gen eds, ideally, they'll transfer between a lot of the majors. But if we are going to a university that only has that kind of field, you might be a little bit more limited.
Yeah, those are great tips. Awesome stuff. So I'm right when you were kind of thinking about that, because I'm thinking about sitting my son down and talking to him about these types of conversations. Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? What's interesting you? What's kind of the timeline of doing a lot of these things that we're talking about? Like, what's too early? What's too late? And you mentioned it's not really too late because you can do this in college too. But what's kind of the ideal situation based on, age of your kids and getting started with some of this information?
Yeah. When it comes to looking up careers, I think it's never too early. I mean, have fun with it. And the more time, the better. They can shadow, they can have fun, they can do little science projects, whatever it is. When we really want to start figuring that stuff out, I would say no later than junior year in high school. And of course, again, it's never too late. So if we're past that, that's fine. But if you want to try to get ahead, don't wait until senior year. Like I said, all of our families that are seniors, they always say, man, I wish that we had done this earlier. For some reason, there's this false belief out there that junior year is the hard one and then senior year eases up. It doesn't. It really doesn't. You have admissions. This year's a little strange, but there's just so much going on senior year, and then senioritis kicks in, which is a real thing. So the earlier we can get this done, the better. So if I could, I would start sophomore summer and start strategizing and finding our list of scholarships to apply to. There's many out there that they can apply to as a junior. So that's when I would hardcore start working on this. But again, for those of you with younger kids, it doesn't hurt to start doing a couple searches, see if you find something. Also, I have a close friend and mentor of mine that he pays his children $5 for every application that they submit. They are not eligible yet because they're not at that grade level, but they're getting their miles in now. And so by the time they become a junior and a senior, they'll be scholarship machines. And we have another family that actually took that idea with their senior. And in the end, he paid, I think it was like $200 or something like that. He was giving them, I think, $10 an application or 20 and $200 in, and his son ended up getting $8,000.
Wow.
So he was like, yeah, I'll pay all day. I'm
Heck
fine
yeah,
with
right?
driving.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's a great tip. I think I'm going to put that in my wheelhouse for later. That's awesome.
It's a lot cheaper than credits.
Yeah,
so.
no question. So speaking about that, going back to the myths, I know like when I was in high school, there was this myth that grades start to matter. I think it was like sophomore year. It's, if I'm understanding right, it's all 4 years of high school, right? That really matters. Is that true?
Yeah. Overall, they're going to look at your high school GPA. And things are so strange that some schools have turned a pass fail. And so they're really relying on earlier GPA. So ideally, and the other thing is, once we bring our GPA down freshman year, it's hard to get it back up.
Yeah, right.
So that's something to keep in mind as well. So yes, I would recommend trying to keep that GPA decent. At the same time, don't try to get a perfect GPA and forsake and not take any challenging classes as the solution. So schools see that as well. If you have all straight A's and you only took college prep, normal level classes, they're going to think you didn't really try.
You mentioned that you coach and help people with these essays. Do you have any tips that you may want to share, just with some quick tips, especially if there's juniors and seniors that, are listening, or their parents are listening to this and they want to start the process? What would be some things that you would recommend to them that need to be a part of that essay?
Yeah, absolutely. Essays are so important because, like I'm saying here, GPA, those kind of things, they can be part of the decision making process. But if they're not, what are they relying on? The answer is essays, right? We have to sell ourselves. And so when we're writing these essays, again, remember our framework I mentioned earlier, the 3-part framework. And we have a 3-step process, but then we have kind of the story framework. So I'm going to focus on the framework for today. But the idea is we want to find some sort of, and we can start actually with the values and start, you can even just look up value exercise. This is not something that I came up with myself, but we've built on it. If you look up a list of values, have your student choose out of the whole list, their top 10 values, what's most important to them. Then narrow it down to 5, then narrow it down to 3, and then narrow it down to just 1. And based on those values, try to brainstorm stories or experiences that shaped them. Why is that value important? For example, one of my values is efficiency. And one story could be, well, I'm the oldest of 5. And as a kid, I used to line up my siblings in an assembly line to get the dishes done. And little did I know, at 8 years old, I was actually becoming an efficiency junkie, right? That is already an easy way to backtrack to the story that I can use. And we can brainstorm 5, 10 stories for each value. And then from there, you can see like, okay, wait, this is a really good story and a compelling story. And based on that, so my story is when I was a kid, I used to line my siblings up in an assembly line. That's because I value efficiency, which in turn, I now am pursuing a degree in operations management. And that is why I want to be accepted into your university, which has a top operations management program. This is something I've been passionate about since I was a young child. So you see how I just literally took a story, tied it to a value, and then showed why it's going to make me succeed in the future, because it's something I'm passionate about. That is way more compelling than the reason I want to go to your university is because blank, it's nice. I like the students. It has my major, right? We don't want that listicle kind of approach. We want a story, something engaging. So that said, also, when we're starting off our story, this year we had over 200 applicants for our scholarship. And we got to the point where we hide the names and any kind of identifiers so that it's totally non-biased. And by the end of it, we were actually referring to the students based on their stories. We didn't even realize until we were already in it. And oh, that's the Boy Scout guy, right? Oh, that's the dance costume gal. Yes. And so it just goes to show that we retain stories. That's what we remember. And so scholarship committees, that's what they will recall. And same with admissions. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Start with a story. And that is so important. Every person that won had an amazing story at the beginning of their essay.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is incredible. And you're right. Yeah, stories. And not just in scholarships, but stories help you with a lot of things. You get in sales, man, stories are very, very powerful. So those are some great tips. So last question for you before we share how people can get more information about you. And seriously, I just want to thank you for coming on because, I know my kids aren't there yet, but even just thinking about all of this is very overwhelming. And you've got a great way to kind of just make it very simple. And I've been a part of your workshops and seen some of the stuff that you guys have done. And seriously, this is some great information if you got kids that are getting ready for this stuff. But let's say I'm an adult, all right? Let's say I'm kind of past the student and I'm out of high school, and let's say I want to go back to college or, I want to go back and finish education or do something. Am I out of luck, or are there things out there for me, maybe to get scholarships and some money to do some of this stuff?
So my answer to that is, of course, that's not our area of expertise as far as helping students that are going back to school. But that said, there are a lot of scholarships out there that don't even ask for, say, age or, you had to have never gone to school before. Some of them will say must be 24 years or younger. I'm not even honestly sure why they say that, but you might see that. Or they'll say you have to be a high school senior or something like that. But if they don't say anything like that, families, parents, it doesn't matter. You can apply. We don't have any stipulations like that besides you must be enrolled in college this fall. And so actually this year we gave out 5 awards, and one was to a mother who's returning back to school. And it was awesome because she just posted after winning our scholarship, she now just won that was her first win. She now just won a second one. She needed that kind of momentum to show that she could keep going. So she actually pulled in, I think it was $600 from us. And then her next win was $4,500. And she's a parent going back to school. So is it possible? Absolutely. It's a matter of, and again, you can get specific on those searches, but don't say, you can look up searches for returning back to school, but also just look up searches based on major and career path, just like I said earlier, and then see if they have an age requirement. If not, I say apply.
All right, guys, you get more information on Jocelyn. I'm going to give you a website. You can go to therealdebtfreedad.com/scholarships. And if you want more great information on how to get this stuff started, she's got a free webinar training called 6 Steps to Securing Scholarships for College. Jocelyn, thanks for taking some time and hanging out with us here today. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, what's this I see? I thought this was a party! Let's dance!
All right. That sound means it's time for the celebrations of the show. And today we're kicking it off with Kelsey Wormsbecker. She paid off a collections bill and lowered a payment of another with the plan to officially pay it off on my first paycheck in November. Awesome job, Kelsey.
Shannon Verity Liardi, this week we sold my husband's motorcycle, paid off my 401k loan 16 months early, $9,015, and another $300 towards credit card debt. Big week for us, she says.
That's a huge week. Awesome job.
Tina Winters paid off $325 credit card bill and paid off a doctor bill of $60 and paid down $200 on another card, and that is almost done.
Awesome. Way to go, Tina. Lindsay Bolus opted to go home and make lunch versus going to a drive-thru. Awesome. We'll be getting a $500 bonus that will go towards a credit card. Sweet.
Jess Frazier, I paid off a credit card, one down, a few more to go. Also added to my emergency fund to bring that total to just over her savings goal for the year. Congratulations.
And Natalie Hochedal saved up enough to pay for my vacation October in cash.
There you go. Nothing better than a paid-for vacation. So congratulations to all of you who are working so hard at reaching financial freedom. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us here today. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our YouTube show. So please give us a like or leave us some honest feedback here. We would love to connect with you. And if you want the latest from the show, be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe to our channel. And oh, by the way, if you heard that commercial about our Life Without Payments free course, you can head over and find that at therealdebtfreedad.com. Just click on tools and courses, and you'll have access to all of our free tools right there. We'll see you guys on an upcoming show.